Let's get more on the wider impact of Russia's decision. Peter Alexander is a global food security lecturer at the University of Edinburgh. Peter, thank you for joining us as always. The UN says that millions of people will pay the price for Russia's withdrawal. How quickly do you think we will feel the implications of that decision?
Well, the implications are going to be felt through price mechanisms rather than a shortage of supply necessarily. And so far, the prices that have increased a little bit over the last month and over the last couple of days, but not as substantially as we saw a year ago when the blockade was put in place, and also when prices started kind of coming down off that peak from sort of the middle of last year when the grain initiative was signed. So it's really too early to tell just how substantial the impacts are going to be. It's certainly damaging market confidence, and we are seeing the impacts of higher food prices in terms of malnourishment and rises in malnourishment and so forth in many parts of the world. So there's definitely cause for concern.
Yeah, certainly we saw US prices on the rise in terms of wheat and grain. Presumably, the decision by Russia will affect those developing countries first.
Well, it affects everybody. If global cereal commodity prices increase, that will affect the people on the lowest incomes, the poorest in the world globally. Obviously, because they spend the greater percentage of their incomes on food. But it isn't just, as I say, it has a bigger impact in sub-Saharan Africa and other countries of that, who have lower incomes. But that's not the only impact. It's felt very much globally.
And there's a delegation of African leaders on their way to Ukraine. We know that they have in the past been supporters of Vladimir Putin, have had a good relationship with Russia. Can they bring some weight to bear on Russia to perhaps get Vladimir Putin to change his tune?
Hopefully. And that was the feeling was that the initial grain deal that was signed in July last year was to some extent came about through pressure of that nature. And so maybe that pressure again will bear fruit. But as I say, it's impossible to know for sure. And we do need to also remember that it's not just about the food; it's also about the fertilizer here that we have to think about, because obviously that's used around the world to increase yields and to generate productivity of foods that are produced and consumed domestically, rather than just sort of imported from Russia and Ukraine.
And just as a final thought, Peter, is it worth re-emphasizing that Ukraine and Russia are the breadbasket of the world, the largest suppliers of wheat and grain, and until this conflict is resolved, the world will continue to struggle with global food prices?
Breadbasket of Europe, I think, is probably a fairer reflection rather than breadbasket of the world, but certainly they are very important. Although, as I mentioned just a second ago, a lot of cereals are produced and consumed in the same country, sort of domestically, which is why kind of agricultural inputs are so important, as well as those inputs of food commodities directly. So yeah, it's important, but it's not the only important thing. So if we compare the situation to a year ago, where we had these really high natural gas prices and very high fertilizer prices as a result of that, then that was a real, that sort of compounded any loss of supply of food commodities due to the war. And we don't have that to anything like the same extent as we did 12 months ago, or a little bit more than that. So we're in a slightly better position, I think, which is why I think we might see slightly less dramatic increases in prices. Nonetheless, it still has negative consequences for many millions of people around the world. So I don't want to kind of downplay it too much, but I do hope that it will be slightly less dramatic than it was last year.
Good to talk to you, Peter. Thanks for coming on the programme.